Hello students, welcome to my channel. In today's lecture, we'll study basic about what is procedure-oriented programming and object-oriented programming. So let us start with procedure-oriented programming. Now what do you understand by procedure-oriented programming? In procedure-oriented programming, the conventional programming language, the traditional programming language like C, like COBOL, like Fortran, okay, all this language is known as the conventional programming language and it follows the paradigm of procedure oriented programming. So what happened in such kind of programming? In such kind, the program is being viewed as a sequence of activity. Okay, it is viewed as a sequence of things to be done. Any problems are there in your hand, you will think of how you are going to solve those problems, like reading any values, like calculating any values or anything. So to accomplish those tasks, you are going to write the functions. Okay, you are going to write the function. So in procedure oriented programming, the main focus is on function. You are going to write the function to carry out the task. So for any of the program, if your program is having too many of codes, so you will just write down the functions to accomplish those tasks. And another important feature is the global variable. You are going to use the global variable. Now this global variable can be accessed by all the functions. Even though each function is going to have their local data, but they will also access the global variable, which is a key variable which is used in multifunction programming. Now, whenever you are going to deal with the global data are more vulnerable to the inadvertent change made by the functions. So there are many functions and all those functions are going to access those global data. So we cannot keep track of which function is making change to those global data. So because of such kind of scenario, the bugs can creep into your program. You can have more number of bugs. And because of this approach, that is a main program. Okay, what is the approach? The approach is the main program is broken down into function 1, function 2, okay, a function 3 and so on. Again it is broken down into various functions and it will use the global variable to carry out those tasks, and global variable are more vulnerable to the inadvertent change made by the function. So you can say that this procedure oriented programming, even though many of the strong languages belongs to those paradigm, okay, it cannot model the real world problem. So basically in the procedure oriented programming, the more emphasize what is the characteristic. If we think of the procedure oriented programming, it is going to emphasize on doing the work. Large programs are broken down into smaller program called as functions. So you can say that emphasizes on doing the job, okay, doing the work or anything. Next is large program is divided into smaller program called as functions. So functions are the key points. Next is most of the functions are going to use the global data, and data whatever are there, they are going to move freely in between the various functions, and function is going to transform the data from one form to another, and this approach is called as the top down. Okay, it is called as the top down approach in the program design. So this is about the procedure oriented programming, which emphasize on the doing things. The large program are broken down into the functions. In multifunction program, we are going to use the global variable. Global variable are more vulnerable to change, so there is opportunity for bugs to creep in. They cannot model the real world problem. Okay, to overcome such kind of issue, we are going to have the object oriented programming paradigm. Okay. So here it is going to remove the flaws which are there in the procedure oriented programming. So the object oriented programming treat data as the critical element. Okay, means the data cannot move from one functions to another functions without any kind of linkage or anything. So it doesn't allow the data to flow freely around the system. So how it is going to move or how it is going to operate? So over here the concept of object is being introduced. So object oriented programming allows decomposition of the problem into number of entities called as object, and then build data and functions around those objects, whatever objects are there. Okay, whatever objects are there, those objects are going to communicate with one another, and the object is going to have its own data and its own function. So more emphasis is on the data, and data is treated as a critical element. They cannot move freely. Means over here we are going to use the concept of class, we are going to use the concept of objects. Data structure are designed such that they characterize the object. Functions that operate on data of an object are tied together in the data structure. Okay, whatever functions. So each object is going to have the data and the functions, which is going to, suppose this is the object 1, this is your object 2, this is your object 3. Okay, like ABC, whatever you can take. Functions that operate on data of an object are held together in data structure. Data is hidden and cannot be accessed by external function, and these objects are going to communicate with the help of function. It follows the bottom-up approach in the program design. So whenever you are going to talk about object-oriented programming, you have to remember that emphasis is not on just doing the task, emphasis is on the data. This is accomplished with the concept of class. We'll see in a further lecture what is class. By using the object, we are going to create the object of the class, and that is how they are going to communicate. So you can see that object oriented programming as a approach. Okay, what it is? It is an approach that provides a way of modularizing program. Means you are going to create the program or a large project as the module by creating partitioned memory area for both data and function that can be used as template for creating copies of such module on demand. So, object-oriented programming as an approach that provides a way of modularizing program by creating partition memory area for data and function that can be used as a template for creating copies of such module on demand. Means whatever problem is there in your hand, whatever projects are there, you are going to use the concept of modularizing. You are going to create the module. For that you are going to use the concept of class. For that you are going to use the data and functions, and such kind can be used for creating multiple copies so that it can be used accordingly. So you just have to understand that this approach of object-oriented programming help us to create or help us to solve the real life problem by using the concept of class and objects and the functions, those functions which can be operated with the help of object, or you can say that you are going to create the object of the type class, and then you will carry out all the action to get your result, to get your work done. So again we'll just revise in short whatever we have studied. We have studied about what is procedure oriented programming. In procedure oriented programming, the emphasis is on doing the things. Here we are going to use the concept of functions to do our task. Okay, we are going to use the functions. We are going to have the global variables, and those global variables are accessible to various functions. So it is more vulnerable to change. So your program can have some kind of bugs which creeps in because of those global variable, and it uses the procedure oriented programming uses the top down approach. Whereas in the object oriented programming, data is treated as a critical element. Means data cannot just move from one functions to another function, one place to another place. You cannot do those kind of activity because all the data are bind to the certain objects, and then they are going to communicate with the help of functions. So you can say that in this approach of object oriented programming, the more emphasis is on the data. You are going to use the modularizing way of creating partition memory for both data and functions, which is going to act as a template for creating copies of such module on demand. Means what you will do, whatever problem is there in your hand, you will try to solve with the help of class. Then you will create the object of that type class. Whatever functions are there, whatever member functions you are going to define in those class can be accessible by only those objects, and then they will be able to communicate. So depending upon need, once you are going to define a class, you can create n number of objects to accomplish all your task in your hand. So I hope that the basic concept of what is procedure oriented programming and what is object oriented programming is understood. So thank you for watching the lecture. Hope you have understood. If you have any query, you can post in the comment section. Thank you.